everybody. Welcome to the Pursuit of Happiness, where we discuss how policy shapes our personal destinies. I am so happy to be here with Melissa Byrne, decade-long student loan rights activist. I was about to say cancel student loan activist, but it's kind of much bigger than that. So I don't want to minimize all the work you do in education justice to just that, though it's also so. Where are we, Melissa? I have so much to talk about with you being in front of the White House every day, but I'll let you speak for yourself.
Well, we are close to getting a win, but in DC talk, that means you still have to keep fighting, because as we learned from that awful spot of the fall over Build Back Better, is that you can think you have a win, and then someone goes on Fox News and does a thumbs down and everything gets blown up. So I'm acutely, because I worked a lot on Build Back Better, I'm acutely aware that nothing is a win until it's actually a win. And yeah, so where we are is just trying to close the deal on this, land the plane, get it in the touchdown, whatever metaphor you want to use. But right now, instead of having to debate the concept of should we have student loan cancellation, the debate now is how much debt to cancel and how to cancel it, which is great because we can win that too. Because we really need to cancel all the federal debt, and we need to do it automatic for everyone. No hoops to jump through. We already had to jump through hoops when we filled out FAFSA forms and had to prove that our parents didn't have the money to write a big check for our college, which is why people got debt in the first place. Meanwhile, the rich kids, they got their parents to pay for their college. They don't have to pay a tax penalty on getting that gift of an education. And when they enter the workforce, they don't have to, set aside 10% or more of their income a month to pay a penalty for not having rich parents. So yeah, but we're building up a lot of power.
Well, and I had an amazing time yesterday. Anyone who wants to should definitely go check out our stream in front of the White House yesterday.
It was so much fun having you there. And Jocelyn came out in the rain. It was legit, this huge downpour, which maybe it's good luck, wedding day and rain means good luck. If anything, it does really answer the question that, are these people actually from a working class background? Because we all know that rich people would not stand out in the rain.
Right. It's kind of and again, I know I quote you on this all the time. Look, if this issue benefited rich people, it would have been solved already.
Yeah, no, rich people are profiting off this debt. That is why it's a pain to get it canceled, because they don't want to admit how much money they make off of many aspects of this debt. So yeah, it was so great seeing you out there. You came in our colors without knowing it was our colors, and it was so much fun listening to you talk with the people who were there as the band played, because our whole thing is that it is very joyful to cancel student loan debt. So we are modeling the joy that we're putting into the world when Biden canceled it. Not to mention, it's how we save democracy too. No biggie.
Yeah, well, especially because, I'm really grateful to you, Melissa, because you really did educate me on a lot of this stuff. I think one of the big ways was the role that shame plays in this fight. So I put up a clip from the stream on the act.tv Instagram yesterday, and the comments were just out of control. And it just really made me even more grateful in a negative way. It made me even more grateful for the work you're doing, because our power is really strong on this issue, but the trolls are really strong too, because they're weaponizing the shame of capitalism to create all these lies about who this issue is affecting.
Yep.
If I hear MSNBC one more time canceling Ivy League graduates' loans, Ivy League graduates do not have loans, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of the Ivies are now loan free. You do have some older people, who have some debt remaining from Ivies, but yeah, generally.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I start most of my debts from St. Joe's before I transferred to Penn. Penn was actually less debt for me because they had robust funding for financial aid. So there's how that works. That's the linkage between the two. So yeah, I think that what it is you have a lot of commentators. I call them the bad group chat. So I imagine Matt Iglesias and Mark Goldwine and Beth Akers and Kevin Carey all in a group chat, getting really mad about cancellation. And what these people have in common is like they come from wealthier backgrounds. They come from backgrounds where they didn't struggle with debt. Like, I mean, Matt Iglesias went to Dalton, which is like one of those like fancy New York City high schools. And then he went to Harvard for free because his parents paid for it. And then because he supported the Iraq War, he had like this very great start to his career as a blogger. And he's taken seriously as this like expert know-it-all, but he doesn't really know anything because he doesn't have the lived experience of a harm. And I think that that's something that people who've experienced the harm are just supposed to be the validating stories. Like, they're just supposed to be the ones that say the story, smile for the camera, and then fade to black. But the people who can actually solve the problem are the like very fancy people who aren't impacted. And I think that's something that the student debt people, like, I'm trying to change, because as someone who's impacted, I'm not supposed to be leading in this way. And I'm not supposed to, like, it's supposed to be like people with like fancy law degrees and no debt that are, creating the moral arguments and getting us to a win on this. But I think it's a lot of people with debt who are finally speaking up. And I think we're changing the game in terms of like how we do advocacy for ourselves, especially because generally speaking, like, rich people aren't writing checks for us to do this work. The best people that are working in this organization, it's like their portfolio, and this work because they want to, because
I
know the stories, their friends that are impacted.
It's so true. And, you've talked a lot before about how, a lot of people say, well, why working class kids should just go to trade schools. And look, if you're someone who prefers like working with your hands and you'd rather have like the kind of put it all togetherness that can come from trades, that's great. But it should, again, I'm quoting you directly, Melissa, it should never be used as a shorthand for working class students don't deserve nice things, which it frequently is.
Yeah, because you would never go to Sidwell Friends and tell the kids that Sidwell Friends, for people who aren't in the DC area, is one of the fanciest prep schools. Think like children of presidents go there, grandchildren of like presidents and vice presidents, that kind of school. And you would never go to Sidwell and say, oh, most of you guys should just really plan on working in the trades. And like what that does, it's like a double-edged sword. One, it stigmatizes trades. Like, we wouldn't have survived COVID without the trades, without people that do manual labor. Like, we call them essential because like we're okay if they die and we give them praise. But we literally can't survive without people that do trades and build things. At the same time, you would never tell, you don't expect the children of the rich to get their hands dirty with their jobs unless like it's blood because they're a surgeon or something. And that's why like what comes after cancellation is really thinking about how we reform the higher education system. Because the way that I see it is that anyone who's willing to do the work of learning, they shouldn't have an economic barrier. They shouldn't have like a paywall to their future. And if what will make you happy is like being the best phlebotomist out there that works in a hospital and takes everybody's blood, that's like a really important career. I think we saw from like that psycho lady at Stanford, the Theranos person, there's no like pinprick to solve all your problems, even if like that's what
my
like,
gosh, I love that you
said that. You need people that do a good job taking blood, just like you need people that are good public interest attorneys. And the commonality between the two is that your parental income shouldn't dictate what kind of job training that you can get, what kind of education you can get. And that's like a really, like, if you say that to people, that terrifies people, because I think a lot of our system, especially because of Reagan, is really built upon the idea that like if you're rich and you have kids, your kids deserve it. Your kids deserve a better life than their poorer peers.
Yeah, and it's really disturbing. So, we talk about this a lot, but what does create what kind of labor we value, right? Because actually a lot of the labor markets and or just like genres of work that we stigmatize are the most necessary. I once read someone referring to janitary and sanitation workers as the number one public health officials in America, and it's so true. We like if we don't have like clean operating spaces in these hospitals, then surgery isn't going to be safe for these, you know, medical PhD people that come in and do the medical work. It's just, you know, like education and cost of education has been, and you see this all the time, just like a cost of entry point to do those jobs. And
Yep.
it's there to ensure that only rich people can do them.
Yep. And I think that just the way we put people on the ladder, I'll never forget when Obama was president and someone snapped a picture of him, like, I think saying hi to a housekeeping staffer in the White House. And everybody was like, oh, look at that's so nice of him to like say hi to a housekeeper. And I was like, who are you people? You people are such snobs. Like, why wouldn't he be nice to someone? Like,
Yeah.
being a housekeeper shouldn't mean that you don't have the president say hi to you when they work in your work site. Like, that we just have this system that's built upon like who was worthy based upon the number of zeros in your checking account. And I think that that's what really gets it. And I think a lot of these people, going back to like the bad group chat, when they went to college, most of their friends are probably wealthy like them. I think they have a hard time understanding that children of waitresses, children of housekeepers, children of janitors actually learn things and then actually get into the same schools that they got into. So I think a big part of this is that I don't think that they actually believe that people who grew up poor and working class end up in debt, because I don't think they believe that we have the intelligence to go on to college. And like last week, Matt Iglesias wrote in his like annoyingly boring Substack that, well, if you look at public colleges, you know, you're never going to have the same outcomes. I mean, obviously the students that go to the University of Texas at El Paso aren't as intelligent as the students who go to the University of Texas at Austin. And like, right. Like when you have views like that, when you have this broad-based view of like sorting people by their intelligence, not factoring in all these other things, or not factoring in who's developed at 18. Some people like, you know, like all these different things are like, what is even intelligence? And like, they're the ones that get listened to with policy making. This is how you end up in this quagmire of like 45 million people drowning in student debt and Congress doing absolutely nothing about fixing the funding side. So that way we don't keep going forward in this way.
Well, and you know, I love that you said what even is intelligence, because the older I get, the more I'm like, who decided that certain ways of thinking were more valuable than others? Because like having, you know, a lot of physical intelligence, having a lot of spatial intelligence, having a lot of things, you know, like for example, for whatever reason, this culture like really, really, really loves like being a famous writer or famous actor. Why? Like, you know, and I'm saying this as someone who loves books, but like why is that the thing that's like, yes, versus, you know, the nurses who made sure this pandemic was not deadlier than it was and are getting paid barely above minimum wage to work night shifts.
Yeah.
It's just, you know.
Yeah,
Well,
no, it's ridiculous. And, you know, that's why I think people are really shocked that we're doing so well in our work, because I think they look at us as being this like, how are you so close to a win? Like people, I was at a fundraiser for a friend who's running for Congress, and someone else there is an advocate. It's like, oh, you're look like you're going to be the only one that gets a win this year. And I'm like, well, ew, you like what I just took a deep breath and I'm like, I don't have to talk to you. So I'm just going to walk away from you because you're not worth it.
well, and I mean, you are going to get a win though. So I was going to ask you, because like I was checking myself. I'm like, I could have this conversation with her for hours. Tell us how close we are, Melissa, because we're so close.
We're so close. I think so. I think one thing to remember is that we are small but mighty in this world that's working to cancel student loan debt. So when things started moving, so go back to like, let's say March 9th of 2020. I know March of 2020 was basically a year. So we moved really quickly as soon as they started talking about all of these things that are being done around COVID policy. Like this is still when like every day it's like, is COVID a big deal? Is COVID not a big deal? All of that. I was still in the Bernie campaign then. But when my California team, we won California because we won on Super Tuesday. Not that I am excited about that every day still. We all went to New York City to be the team that ran New York. because we were expecting the primaries to go through June. So we got situated, we landed, and then COVID, that's like that day, it was the day that COVID really became like oh my God, this is like a thing, like a really, really bad thing. And things were going to start changing. And they were debating what kind of economic support to be giving people because of how bad it was looking. So a bunch of us were quietly pushing that, well, we should pause student loan payments, like obviously. And then we won that through the CARES Act. And a big part for me, why I was pushing for the pause, is I learned this great little story my first year in college, where there was, somebody was like mentioned about a parking lot. So there's this like gravel, gross parking lot at the school. And I guess for about 10 years, the facilities department wanted to turn it into a parking lot. It had been a green field. And every time they asked for it to be made into a permanent parking lot, they were denied. And then one year they came back and they were like, we don't want it to be a permanent parking lot. We'll just make it a parking lot for a year. We'll just throw some gravel on there. It'll be a temporary parking lot. And that was approved because people have less anxiety about temporary versus permanent. So for me, the whole point of the pause was twofold. One, it was to like get us through COVID. And two, once you temporarily pause someone having to like pay $1,000 a month or $500 a month or $200 a month, turning that back on is basically like one of the biggest political liabilities ever, because you now have 35 million people plus that are used to being able to keep their paychecks. They're used to being able to have the same experience every 2 weeks that rich kids have, where they're not paying a penalty for having poor parents. And if you were to turn that back on, people are going to blame whoever makes you turn them back on. That's why Trump didn't turn them back on before the election, because he's not stupid. He's evil, but he's not stupid. So that's why, because originally the loans were supposed to turn back on in October of 2020. And he was like, oh, fuck. And he's like, oh, fuck no. So he bumped it to January and like just kicked it out of the cycle. And so that's why we're able to be so close to winning, because you just can't. Now it's been 2.5 years. And, you know, like, who wants to be the person that says, like, you got to pay a tax now?
Not me. I wouldn't want to have that conversation with people. Well, so, okay, we only have a few more minutes. So let me show people a little bit of Congresswoman Presley's speech yesterday. She joined Melissa and all the other fearless advocates / activists. And here's what she had to say.
To know who's burdened by this debt? Look around you. Everybody. I literally have 76-year-olds in my district, senior citizens on fixed incomes, still paying student debt. I have parents who are in their upper 60s who cannot retire because they took out Parent Plus loans and they are still paying on their kids' loans. We have a whole generation of people that cannot start a family, grow a family, start a business, purchase a home because of this debt. And of course, this $2 trillion crisis, the weight of it is disproportionately on Black and brown borrowers. I'm going to speak for a moment about why this is a racial justice issue. As a Black woman, my lived experience is consistent with what the data shows us. Now, we've been told we live in a meritocracy and that education is life's great equalizer. And the way to close the racial wealth gap was for more Black Americans in marginalized communities to pursue higher education. We did that, but it has not narrowed the racial wealth gap. It has grown it. And 85% of Black student borrowers had no choice but to take out loans to pursue higher education because of draconian policy violence like redlining, which denied our families' ability to build generational wealth. We're then 5 times more likely to default on those loans. And then peep this, 20 years after we take these loans out, Black borrowers still owe 96% on their loan. White borrowers, 6%. And moreover, 40% of those that are burdened by debt didn't even get a degree. And we're not even talking about those who have been preyed upon by the deceptive business practices and predatory marketing of for-profit colleges and universities. Look, we know that there are broader reforms and work that needs to be done to make college more affordable. We know we need tuition-free college. We need to invest in our historically black colleges and universities. We need to expand Pell Grants. That's all true. But canceling student debt by executive action at $50,000 will close the racial wealth gap by 30% and immediately alleviate the hurt and this burden for millions of people. If we do it at $50,000, 48 million people will no longer be burdened by this debt. So this is a racial justice issue. It is an economic justice issue. It is a gender justice issue because 2/3 of this nearly $2 trillion debt are carried by women. And this is a smart strategy as we seek to recover from this pandemic-induced recession. This is a way to jumpstart the economy. So President Biden has the authority. We have been out here for months organizing, mobilizing, telling the stories to illustrate this hurt, how far and how deep it goes. And we were successful 3 times, and we thank the administration for heeding our calls and putting a pause on student loan payments during this pandemic. And that has been game-changing. People have been able to use that money to remain safely housed, to purchase essential goods. Some people have even become first-time homeowners, and that's just been in 2 years. So imagine how transformational, how meaningful, how impactful if we see student debt cancellation by executive action at $50,000. I want to thank this entire movement. We are closer than ever before to getting this done. I am in ongoing communication with the White House. In fact, just recently was a part of an effort with the Congressional Black Caucus and a meeting, a negotiation with the White House. And so we are closer than ever before to getting this done. The president was given the authority through the Higher Education Act. Now, let me say this. I know none of you on here are saying, just write the bill. Why executive action? Guess what? We've written bills. But you see the stagnation currently, what is happening as we continue to be met with Senate Republican obstruction on issues of consequence to everyone who calls this country home. This is something that the president can do unilaterally, without reconciliation, without a single vote from Congress. And so he has the power, but the stroke of a pen, to lighten the load of the American people. And so we're going to stay out here and keep organizing, keep mobilizing, keep amplifying and telling your stories, listening to those who have been closest to the pain, because you deserve to be closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making. And we just want you to know that we see you. And the last thing that I want to say is someone who did default on my loan, and it took me a very long time to pay it back. There's so much shame that goes along with the burden of this debt. It's not only about the ways in which we're being denied economic freedom because we're saddled by this, but people are carrying so much shame that they have debt. This isn't a character flaw. We know you're working multiple jobs and you still can't get ahead. And you're barely touching even the interest on these loans. And if you do end up paying them off, which, by the way, 40% of people will never pay these loans back. So this does not contribute to the deficit in any way. If you do end up paying your loans off, you end up paying much more than you originally even borrowed. So this is a nearly $2 trillion crisis. The burden is heavy. We can alleviate it, and we just have to keep the pressure up, because what I know is that government doesn't always lead, but it does respond. And in this moment, we are going to keep pushing until we get a response that is responsive to the calls and the needs of the diverse coalition, multiracial, multi-generational coalition of voters, issues-based activists who were carrying signs saying cancel student debt, who delivered this Democratic majority. This is not charity we're asking for. This is restitution. We're saying keep your word. Keep your word. Cancel this debt. Just do it. You can do it by executive action, stroke of a pen. And in the meantime, we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We gonna stay out here. I'm happy to be out here with my activist family. Shout out to the musicians, because there's never a revolution without artists. So shout out to the musicians and the artists, and and thank all of you for being a part of this movement. But let's keep it up. We're closer than ever before. They are listening, and that has everything to do with your vigilance and your tenacity. So let's just stay at it.
I love her so much. I can't hear you. Are you there? Melissa? Oh. That's not good. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?